very good afternoon to you all. Mr. President, former President of the Republic of Ghana, President John Ajay Kufuor, the immediate past Speaker of Parliament, Professor Mike OQUAYE, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you are all very welcome to this fourth edition, actually, of the IEA Constitutional Review Series. I'm privileged also to acknowledge Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Mrs. Jean Mensah, the Deputy Chair of the Electoral Commission, Dr. Bosman Asari, and another Deputy Chair of the Electoral Commission, Dr. Sribo Kweku, Madam Chief Justice, Madam Tofai Kufu, former Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana, Justice Emil Short, former Commissioner of SHRAJ, Honorable Samoku Jato, a member of the Council of State, Ms. Kathleen Addy, Chairperson of the National Commission on Civic Education, Professor Vladimir Inchidanso, Dean, Ghana Armed Forces and Command College, Dr. Abu Sakara, founder of the National Interest Movement, a former presidential candidate, Susanna Edua Mankwa, I think of the CPP. No, apologies. Mr. Peter McMenu, former NPP, he's the NPP chairman, sorry. So, pardon me. Nana Frimpoma Sapon Kumankuma, chairperson of the CPP. Mr. Kweku Sechi Ado, seasoned journalist. I was telling him I used to watch him when we were growing up. Dr. Samuel Onyuna, retired World Bank economist. Jacob Osei Yeboah, independent candidate, and say independent candidate, the independent presidential candidate for the future, maybe. So anyway, and then of course the media, members, distinguished members of the media, IEA fellows, Reverend Frimpong Manso, thank you. Reverend Professor Frimpong Manso, yes. All right, thank you so much. Media, men and women of the media, we are so happy to be here, privileged to be here at this beautiful, 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 in capital letters, mansion, okay, palace sounds better, of our distinguished former president. And it's such a privilege to be here, so happy. And we are happy to have time with him today. And so we really are looking forward to hearing from him and getting all that he has for us, the wisdom and the experience that he has over the years. And so, without further ado, I think I'm going to hand over to Professor Aaron, Right Honorable Professor Aaron Michael OQUAYE, who will continue the proceedings. But let me say that you are all very, very warmly welcome to this afternoon's seminar. Thank you very much.
Your introducing lady is Dr. Mami Jechi Danko Jando, immediate past head of the Department of Political Science in the University of Ghana. Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Institute of Economic Affairs, the leading think tank of our country, the first we established, and which had done a number of things, including the Transition Act, which it commissioned, party representation, which later proved very, very successful, has found it fit to establish a Center for Constitutional Studies, which it graciously named after me. And my first task was to look together with distinguished persons in public life, for which matter I'm grateful to Dr. Emily Short, our immediate past Chief Justice, Honorable Okudeto, and a number of others who have shown keen interest in helping to re-examine our Constitution, which has seen a number of, but which of course has not been the most velvet-like operator of all activities. Today we even continue to look at other partners, including the National Commission for Civic Education, for which matter the chairperson is here today, the Parliament of the Republic of Ghana, for which I appreciate the contributions of the majority leader, the minority leader, and their all of whom have been in attendance at the IEA to have a constitution, maintain that which we think is good for us, and perhaps amend that which we think could be amended in order to have a better document. Course of events, I approached my boss, President J.A. Kufuor, with whom I had a discussion right in this house over our proposal. And I proposed that we could visit him and enjoy the ambience of this hilly and then have discourse with him on this topic. In the past, he had expressed certain opinions, both in his private discussions with me and also in public generally, about the Constitution. Today, in this republic, he is the only surviving person who has done 8 years as president of our country. Therefore, it's just fit and proper that we should have a closer walk with him and see what are the ways in which he is also of the view that we can amend things and move on better. We trust that in the future we'll be able to meet with President Mahama, the current president, and others who have also had a taste of the real dynamics of our constitutional framework. Therefore, we are here this afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for you to help us attain this objective. We're going to have a very structured discussion, beginning with asking the President to comment on a number of already identified areas by way of a synopsis. And then we're going to have contributions from the, what I may call the, from participants. And we'll take that as a way of having your comments, having your own viewpoints as a way of enriching the process. In the final analysis, all these are going to be gathered. We are recording them. Nana Dr. SKB Asante started his own viewpoints. We regard him as the father of the Constitution. And next week we are going to have Justice Robe, who was also the secretary of the consultative assembly. Therefore, with the views of all these persons, we trust we'll be able to have a compendium that will be a useful document, and then we'll have a powerful roundtable to make recommendations which will be placed in appropriate quarters towards the process that we take. So that, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, with this introduction, I will respectfully start with asking the President to discuss with us what important views he has with regard to specifically the Council of State. We'll come to general ones. We shall start with the specificities regarding the Council of State with its traditional and other background, so that we tackle the whole matter from there. Mr. President, your viewpoints on our Council of State, how you see it. You've got a traditional background from Apagefie and the whole country, and we want to see how, in your view, this good institution started in 1969 is working, and how we can make it better in the interest of the nation. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Former Speaker. To begin with, I have to welcome all of you as friends and as very distinguished. Personally, the way I see the gathering, we are all very, very distinguished, committed, public-spirited, Ghana public leader servants. I see the former Chief Justice here, Mr. Emil Short. Are you a former justice or somebody like that? Fellow politicians who attempted to be presidents, at least. Sam, this old man sitting here, the two of us went into, is it Parliament or Constituent Assembly in 1968. I see some of the ladies and gentlemen here who perhaps were not even then born, but we soldiered on through Constituent Assembly, Parliament 69, when it was a parliamentary system, not executive presidential system, through to a long, I went into detention, prison detention, after the Second Republic, but he escaped that experience. And then I see all the parties are here represented. Former chairman of my party, I see some chairman. They keep talking of imbalance between the genders, and yet these days they have taken the lead, and now they don't want to be reminded or practice balance. So I see some of them here. So welcome to all of you in such, and then the electoral chairman of the, or is it chair lady of the Electoral Commission, also present with some of her staffers. And then it's IEA. I remember in its early days when it had offices somewhere in Jolo. Those days, we were far from returning to constitutional rule. And once or twice I got invited to participate in some colloquium. So you are all here, and we have all been searching for good governance for our country. So I welcome you. The chair, or Professor OQUAYE, visited me. I thought it was just a normal thing, and anytime we meet, somehow, he being a professional teacher, a scholar, he picks brains. He started chatting on the Constitution, and naturally on one or two institutions of states, I expressed a view. Then as he was going, typical teacher, he sort of tricked me. He said, we were doing something, we may visit you, I will come with some friends. I said, any day the doors would be open. Then before I knew, this thing, he landed this thing on me. And really, I didn't think it would be like I'm seeing. I'm overwhelmed. And already in today's papers, I've seen a picture of mine. I looked a bit younger than I feel. Saying I was doing something in my house about this review and say, but this is not my idea, it's Professor OQUAYE's idea. But all the same, it's for Ghana. And so I say, welcome to all of you. The professor is a man of so many sides. Academic, a lawyer, a politician, and also as well. So a man like that, you get entangled with him, sooner or later you may feel confused a bit. But you've asked me, I thought we were going to talk of constitutional review generally. Why do you pick Council of State when some Okujeto is sitting staring me, waiting to debate or, you know. I would say, first question we should be asking is why a constitution at all for any organization, in particular a state? And that's the question I thought you were going to begin with.
President, we start from that premise.
Huh?
We will start from that.
But now you said I should talk on Council of State.
No, start from that premise, and we'll continue.
All right, go back. That's the question you put to me. I would remind you I'm not in the dock, so you don't tie me down to say yes or no. But Council of State, yes, I've had a few occasions to express my view or views on Council of State. Very honorable, distinguished institution, well-meaning. But I say, I don't think it's fit for purpose. Given the stage of development of our country, and given the fact that the nation is committed to practicing democratic governance, and when you talk democracy, you are talking of essentially like one man, one vote. So a majority may carry the day. It doesn't mean the majority might be informed enough to be able to influence policy and its implementation in ways that would conduce to the enlightened development that I believe should be the central purpose of a constitution for a nation or any organization. It's just that they have the numbers, and sometimes their attitudes and actions may really lead to something like mob rule, and that's not what we want. So you go to a parliament where majority, they say minority would have a say, but majority would have its way. Its way is not assured that it would be perhaps the thing that would better the lot, inclusively of the citizenry of the land. But then we would all be bound by the Constitution to follow that. So I believe the framers of Constitution thought of a body like Council of States that necessarily should be composed in a way that would bring individuals of experience, of, with all due respect, wisdom, people of, with all due respect, caution and prudence to guide governance. So society would be better served rather than just the majority rule in Parliament. The way the Constitution frames from as far back as 69, when, as I say, we was member of Constituent Assembly 68, 69, like him, Sam, and also then member of majority side, in fact, Deputy Foreign Minister at that time. We limited the Council of States to just advise just the president. The president would meet this council in camera. Given the nature of the members of the council, very mature, experienced, the people who wouldn't go out of, say, the camera after giving advice to president, and whether if the president accepted or didn't accept, would go and tell the public, no, we advised him to do this or that, but he rejected us. Perhaps he didn't even hear us. They wouldn't do it by just the way they are. And this continued, 69, 79, 92, and currently. So I've gone through all these periods, and so I've come to the conclusion, perhaps what our Constitution should have to temper the extremes of democracy is not Council of State, but a second chamber. A second chamber, well composed, not on basis of democracy so much. Democracy should always be implied in there though, but not directly democratically, but more on proven experience, proven public spiritedness, prudence, maturity, care for the nation inclusively. If we do that and allow this second chamber to operate openly, the full glare of publicity, then the wisdom that would issue from their deliberations would impact not only the president, nor even the legislature, but even the judiciary as well, and then the public at large, because stage of development would demand that all of us get exposed to mature opinions. It would enable us all to read between lines. So when the democratic institutions like, say, the executive president or legislature, the People's Forum, second house or lower house, and then the general public, where they are going astray, there will be people, civil society organizations, or the media will be able to join in and say, no, Mr. President, please take time. You are, after all, our first servant. You shouldn't manage our affairs this way. Or the members of parliament. Yes, you may have a majority in the House, but the way you are going, you haven't taken due account of such and such and such a situation to help stabilize the nation and also make for progress. And then the people at large. These days we hear of populism and grassroots actions and all that, protest marches and all that. People must really get insights. And so this is why I thought, instead of our continuing with Council of State, perhaps the time has come we should move into a second house. It might cost a bit more. And so what? We want quality to serve the ends of good governance and the people at large. And so if we would pay a bit more and get these cents, then I would say perhaps the days of Council of States should be over. Let's move in straight. The challenge would be how we compose this second house. And perhaps there we would use identifiable institutions. You keep on talking to me or telling about my being informed of the traditional ways. Yes, I am a bit. But traditional ways tend to be monarchical. We are not talking monarchy now. We are talking republicanism, the people at large. So with the monarchies, yes, the king or chief is the person who must be advised. But president really is not a monarch. He is really a people's servant and must made to feel think openly, and if he's going astray, because power, they say, corrupts. We do not want to saddle ourselves with so-called strong man who wouldn't listen and who would want to drag us wherever he wants to drag us. That's not what we should want. And this is why we need an open system, respecting democracy, all right, but at the same time, contributing towards shaping leadership within the executive, within the legislature, and even with the judiciary, which must be independent. The oracle, but still might go wrong. The Council of State, the second house, I mean, might be able to put the judiciary on its toes always to ensure it does not stray to, in a way, violate the democratic principle. Because I believe sovereignty really is the people who must be served by the Constitution. So this is my view on Council of State. Thank you. We identify, of course, when I say we, I'm talking of the nation altogether. You talk tradition. Yes, there must be some traditional presence in there. Perhaps House of Chiefs being assigned about, say, if you like, 10 reps. The religious leaders, Christian, Islam, and perhaps a free-thinking person. I've got another, perhaps 10. The academia, because that's where reading about the philosophies like you and traditions and histories might also contribute something. Then the professions, law, medicine, the financial side. Then I believe in the private sector very much, because I believe a priority of effort should be devoted to private sector to grow wealth. Without wealth, we talk corruption these days. When the system is poor, I tell you, no matter what you do, you may not get out of the grips of poverty. So wealth creation, and for that, you need to recognize the society of industrialists, traders, and so forth and so on. So they too. So if all together we have an assembly of 80 to 100, I tell you, the difference that that body would make to governance would be superb. When I say I propose, I'm not saying it should be so powerful as to deny the lower house its democratic purpose, the people representing the people directly. No, or also denying the president the necessary authority to govern using the executive agencies effectively. Its main purpose would be to, through discussions and debate, expose the pitfalls within society and economy in ways to make everybody appreciate why this policy should be so framed and implemented, or why we should be cautious in going that way. Tame democracy a bit, delay actions. So when the lower house, for instance, rushes with certificate of urgency, this house would debate and let people know why rush with this thing, which might lead to perhaps heavy loss in terms of finance and that sort of thing. So it's to delay, to temper, also to vet. Yes, I know lower house vets, but where there's majority and parliamentary committees tend to be composed with majority principle, democratic majority. And if a majority would present somebody for, say, minister, or even when they are considering judges, and majority has decided this is the person we want to put there, the majority would carry the day, and that person may not be too fit for what we've been assigned to. So the upper house, the Senate, or whatever you call it, would assign the vetting to that body. So you get objectivity on the person, whether truly his experiences, his basic qualifications, his attitudes, and due diligence would be done dispassionately, and which would, I believe, redound to the good of society. And so that thing there, not to deny democracy, but rather to better democratic practice. So the size may do, you may take it into account. The cost of running such a house must be taken into account. But I tell you, we shouldn't be sort of penny wise and pound foolish.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It has often been said that it's appropriate for the President, under our present dispensation, that is under the Constitution, to appoint more than half of the council which advises him. You know better about our traditional system. Before a chief comes into office, the council of the chief exists already. And in fact, they are there as of right. In other words, they are the heads of various small in the kingdom. And they advise who becomes chief loyally, but they can also put their feet down as individual independent elders who come to the council as of right. This process of presidential appointment of majority of members of the Council of State, some critics look at it as a weakness in the system. In the future Council of State, your view on this arrangement?
You are assuming I'm agreeing with you that the Council of State should continue. I've made my point. I wouldn't go for. I'll go for House. I'm overruled. I would say, currently, I believe the points are 11 or so of number 25, 31. So virtually a third. Before it used to be 10, so that was when it was 25. So the president is appointing his advisors, and the House of, or it's a council of 30, 31, and president is appointing a whole third of them, and leaving the remainder to, I think it's too much. It's too much, no doubt. Even the second house I talk about, I believe the composition should include some representation from the organs of state, presidency, executive, yes, legislature, yes, and then judiciary, the main ones. Of course, the fourth estate may be included in the house, as I've said. But why the organs should be represented, I believe, should be for the upper house or second house to get to know why, say, the executive is formulating such a policy or implementing such a policy. The representation from the executive would have to, but then it shouldn't be so large as to be able to negate the viewpoints of the others. So altogether, if the organs would come in, a clear minority, but only sharp, well-informed to be able to explain why this or that to this upper house. So the president should be able to nominate some people to be part, to explain to the Council of State, but not as large as a whole third or earlier times, it was even bigger than third.
Mr. President, as you are aware, in the United States, we have a Senate and a House of Representatives, and in a way whereby they have different tenure periods. That's what brings about the midterm elections and so on and so forth. As some are in, some are going, and so on and so forth. These are all part of the counter checks, so that it's not like everything starts again. A president comes, he appoints the majority of the, quite a large number of the Council of State directly, and influences actually the election of others indirectly, and so on and so forth. And it's like the republic starts again, afresh, because everybody comes, the parliament comes with the president, and it goes with the president. You think some midterm arrangements a la America can be of some help for us, so that will also be part of the countervailing authority. And you don't come and start everything again as if this republic has been born again because you have become president.
Yeah, right. I think the overlap, if I may call it that way, I have to say the second house should be there for us to realize some purposes for good governance. I talked of tempering the excesses of democracy. I talked of vetting. I talked of showing pitfalls in, say, debates, say, in the lower house, all these things. So necessarily, that this second house should be, in many senses, independent of the democratic processes of selection. And so when the president's term or tenure is up and is going, the upper house should remain. It would help usher in or induct the incoming president. It would make for continuity and stability of leadership in governance. So, yes, but the U.S. system, I think these purposes are embedded in the U.S. system. The only thing there is that their upper house or Senate is also completely done democratically. And they did all that again to get their federal system well anchored and secure. We are not a federal state, but the idea of the tenure overlapping is good, and we should again think of how we get that idea, concept, and embed it in our governance. So when presidents are going, they don't go with the whole team, and then they come, the new one that will come and create his own body of advice. No, that's not good. So I like your idea. We need to work it out.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, you have been president for 8 years in this country. You are very much aware of the theory of the president as under the Constitution, and applying it in actual practical terms. It's been said that the powers of the president are too large. You may not always have a gentle giant. You may have giants someday who may not be that gentle. What were some of your entrapments, or the feeling of, it's like holding your hand and say, if I had not been just a gentle person, I would have done this, I would have done that. And if that is so, what do you think should be some of the countervailing provisions that we should have in the future constitution? Very much of the time, we are all saying generally that the powers of the president over local government, choosing 1/3 of assembly people, and so on and so forth, are just too big. All kinds of public offices, and so on and so forth. What do you think will be the best practice for us here in this our own country?
Well, yes, the president or the Constitution tends to enlarge the authority and powers of the president. Perhaps again, this tendency reflects stage of development. But if truly we want to govern ourselves democratically without losing the practical impetus of development, I would say the checks and balances system we must practice in its pure forms. I don't like the word hybrid at all in this matter. And so that, to begin with, among the lead organs of states, legislature should be apart. People being elected there should encourage to professionalize themselves as legislators. So they would play the guard dogs or watchdogs on the executive to begin with. So president appointing as many as at least 50% of ministers who are also MPs. That one we must stop. The Council of State idea we've discussed. Local government. Why should government appoint MCs? Well, we've expressed fear. Originally, many of us advocated for elected even heads of local governments, administrative heads. But then we feared the fragility in terms of, say, some people wanting to break away, say, some district or region, where if government doesn't have any serious representation there, it might be tempted to say, I've taken off, we are sovereign and we're breaking off from the country. So we said, all right, then we should go slowly, let the president continue to, so that when the assemblies are poor, if we're going to allocate some public funds for them to run, then the central government should have a representation. I think these are things that should be very temporary, and we should face the practice of president appointing MCs, DCs, and that sort of thing. That's not the way for us to go. Democracy really should begin from grassroots, and the people. Leadership should be learned from there. Go to local government to manage and then come to the national also to practice. So, as I said, what the practice now is just a convenient way to ensure that quality is held together. But as we mature, I believe President should not have the privilege of appointing MCs and that sort of thing. Evolution should be encouraged. And the slogan of local government is from cradle to grave. If you don't have the child to learn to walk and that sort of thing, how would he mature into manhood or whatever and be responsible for himself? So I don't support state doing it, but we must again take care to ensure that even as we practice decentralization, the localities would know how to garner resources to do their work, and also learn to be accountable. So whatever would go from the central authority there to top up in terms of financing in locality would not be sort of squirreled off. So the President should not continue to appoint.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's very clear that you wish we had that dichotomy, typical of 79, so that MPs will be MPs and the executive will be the executive. You, incidentally, you are one of the very few people alive who were in the 1969 Parliament. You were also in the 1979 Parliament. 1992, you were contesting for president. 2000, you became president. So you passed through the trajectories, and not many people have been through. In fact, at the apex level, you may be the only person who has gone through it from that 69 level right up to the top. What have been your observations in terms of executive during this Fourth Republic, and what recommendations will you make for the future?
We would have to go back into the history of our land. I say land because there was nothing like Ghana, say, in the 19th century. There wasn't, there were just tribes and groups all over the place, and where the colonialism forced us, and then for its own ends, the colonial authority put borders around us to give the beginnings of a state to us. And we didn't become a nation really till into the 1940s, and as recent as that, 1940s and 50s. We were not a nation. And when you look at the political party formations, for instance, UGCC formed, essentially it was just for the colony, as they used to be called. Even Ashanti wasn't quite part of it. And then the North was styled as a protectorate or something like that. Volta was just a trusteeship or something. So when you are talking nationhood, Ghana is not much older than, say, about 70, 80 years. But till independence 57, you look back, the previous, is it about 200-300 years? Before we became aware, the Europeans had begun colonizing. Even before then, the slave trade. And they enforced slave trade through, if you like, strong manhood. They induced us, but later they started stealing people, putting them on board to cross the oceans. So slave mentality, we got brainwashed to accept the superiority of the slave masters. Then from there, the abolition of slave trade became colonialism. We sought protection. We have been kind of protection from these masters again for about 100 years or so. And the natural wealth of our land got usurped by them. They took it as if it was their right. We talk of gold. The Obuasi mines, I'm sure it belonged to the British. Atakwa, all those places, timber, they cut as they wanted. Even into 60s, 70s, because I got involved in timber a bit. You go to a Sefi area, Glextons, who not a paramount chief, nobody would dare challenge Glextons or Briscoe. Or even Mem took the land all right from some chiefs, but the locals looked at Mem like a superior, a friend. They cheated us out. So that mentality So when we came into independence, and the practice continued somehow, the first republic, or even before we became a republic, yes, our first prime minister, who later struggled a bit to really assert some independence. But then we didn't have the wherewithal really to break loose from the psychology and also even the practice. 1960 we became republic, but even there we were swinging. When we asserted ourselves, before we knew, we were hooking in with forces I say we didn't understand, like going to the East. I remember the grand tour of our president to the Soviet Union. He went with a whole plane load of people to attend, as if Africa was asserting itself. Asserting from what and for what? And then later even to the Far East. When Vietnam is fighting, we again take a plane load of people to say we would go and help them resolve. It's like we really were not on top of what we really needed to assert our identity, our true selves. What are we here for? So, but Ghana set the pace on the continent, and so many of the newly independent people followed in our footsteps, and it's through that we messed ourselves up in managing our society and economy, and then the soldiers came in, and then they even did worse than the politicians, who meant well but who were just lost because we hadn't taken pains to think through our beginnings to where we were and where we wanted to go. The soldiers were just adventurous who saw opportunities and came to mess us up. Fortunately for me, into the 50s I was maturing, and I saw the parties at work, government party, opposition party, that happened around my home in Kumasi, wanting to get federalism because didn't want to be trapped into some ideology didn't understand. The opposition didn't make it into independence. And within 1 year after independence, what happened? The Swamp prisons were built up. And I remember late Prof. he would stand on a platform and the party yelled, because where I came from became like the citadel of opposition to the regime. So Prof. would yell, Choboy, and the people, his party people would respond, Nsawam, meaning detention. Just a year after independence, when we'd come into independence with supposedly democratic constitution, government got intolerant from opposition. So they marked you down as opposition, they grabbed you, put you in some for 5 years without trial. That's what happened. That's the truth I'm telling you. So what the effect was for some opposition people to run into exile, even to die there. Businesses failed. And then a few years later, one party state ensued. So we lost our way, we went democratic. And that was what contributed to the soldiers coming in. The soldiers came in '66. Again, they hadn't thought of, they just didn't show vision. They only protested against the practice that occurred in governance. 3 years they abandoned, authority ceded, and that's how we came in. Unfortunately, instead of parties also then talking together on bipartisanship to show a vision of development and all that, we didn't get it. And so with 2 years, 3 months, soldiers came back, talking glibly about Operation Feed Yourself. We won't pay debt the country owed to. And people hailed them, only for them to mess up the nation. So later, they themselves did a palace coup to remove themselves from power. And then when they returned us to Constitutional Rule 79, we got in there. But again, 2 years, 3 months, the soldiers came back. They hung on for 19 long years. So in a sense, it's only our time. And because I had seen so much of this evolution, and I saw things, when I got the opportunity, I thought we needed to establish our identity. We shouldn't be just copycats in terms of ideologies and postures and things like that. We should find ourselves. What do we want as a nation? Are we a nation yet? And if you talk a nation, then things like tribe, things like religion, things like whatever should take second place to the humanity in us. In the world, and fortunately the coincidence of our search with what's happening around the world now is for the human individual to be recognized as a stakeholder everywhere, whether in old Europe, America. People are searching for themselves. And I thought this is... So if we are talking constitutions, we should put real meaning into the fact that we are into times where each and every human individual counts as a stakeholder in governance. That's where inclusiveness will come. That's where true democracy will evolve from. And that's where accountability of leaders. So the concept of strongmen, I think it should be outdated. And that's what I believe Obama was alluding to when he said, it's not strongmen, institutions, the organs of state, how we set them together to operate or cooperate, to yield the good governance that should be the path for human development and evolution. So, yes, I got the chance, step by step, as you said. I want to describe that my maturation as apprenticeship. I saw governance from before independence. I was a schoolboy, but I saw, because the opposition party's head office was in my home in Kumasi. I met some of the big people who led. And then later I became member of parliament, saw government. Later I saw opposition. I saw the insides of prisons. I've been in Ashaford twice. And I was always wondering, what's wrong with us? How come a nation naturally endowed, both with material things and humans? But the Ghanaian goes out and he shines. But come home and he falls up. We don't know what to do with ourselves. So all these things sort of plagued me, and when I got the chance, I thought we should show a difference. And now we are continuing the search. How do we work a constitution that would enable us as a nation to move in ways that would really make Ghana to be like the example on the continent of Africa, to emulate on the continent. So this is my idea.
Thank you very much.
Because we believed Ghana would become the hub for even Europe. The Europeans will bring their money. Our brothers, Nigeria, that time when Nigeria was awash with. But our brothers cancelled this thing. Later I wanted to know why they did that. I heard, it would encourage money laundering. When you have Barclays International for partner, they just cancelled that relationship. That's the second loss. And third was the bauxite aluminum. Kaiser, during 2007, Kaiser built Vaco. And so when the financial crunch happened in America, Kaiser was selling off some of his holdings. And they said they wanted to stick with their core business. So I was in Accra Castle when their vice president came and said, he started off thanking Ghana. Kaiser had been here 36 years, using our energy from Akosombo for peanuts. And Nkrumah allowed them in hopes that Kaiser would mine our bauxite and refine here. Because from beginning, Kaiser brought alumina from Jamaica. And once going got good, Nkrumah was off the scene. Kaiser didn't fulfill the promise of mining. They just kept on using like a unit of energy for a cent. For 30 cents. So, long last they came saying they wanted to sell off Vaco, and they come to inform me. And they were offering, because they had benefited so much from Ghana, they wanted to know if Ghana would be interested to buy. The Electoral Commission chairman, sorry, but let me open up. Her husband, Charles, was the country rep. He came with the vice chairman. So, of course, Ghana was interested. And then he said, so how much? And then he told us about the expenditures, the investment they had made. The factory, the hospital, the estates, 100 million. So I looked at him and said, you say you benefited by us so much. You come to thank us. I thought you were coming to say, so take Vaco. For President, no, you don't do business like that. So, Mr. President, tell how much. So we got into bargaining. And I started so low. He must have felt offended. But eventually he saw we were not going to move. And of course, that moment it came into my head. We would resist if he doesn't give it to us. We won't allow anybody from outside to come and buy. So eventually we agreed. They said all Ghana could afford. We just come out of APEC, we didn't have money. So we'll give you $20 million for everything. In fact, initially it was 18, because we saw that Kaiser had OQUAYE. That time it was the biggest aluminum maker in the world. For partner, like OQUAYE had about 20% or so. So said, we give you 18 million. The man was sweating, but eventually gave him. And OQUAYE had to sell the 20%. So altogether 100%, we bought Vaco for $20 million. Then OQUAYE, because it wanted to continue, invited me to go to Jamaica to see. So we went. And truly, in Jamaica, they mine the ore and refine there. But the way they did it, they were also enriching the Jamaicans, because the people, the whole age companies were local people. And so I got excited. So, yes, we want something like this. We could start with JB bauxite, and then, so let's talk terms. OQUAYE came, the terms were no better than the colonial arrangements they'd done with our money. So we said, no, we won't work with you on those bases. So OQUAYE went. And then Arkan from Canada also came. So they gave only slightly better terms. So we said no. And then we went to Fadeke, Brazil, a company called Vale. They are into us, said they would be partners. They were fairer, and they did feasibility studies. Sorry you are here, but Charles, your husband, we negotiated so well, and the feasibility studies were done. We needed an initial investment of $4 billion to do. As we thought we had concluded, Our own brothers, ISODEC or whatever they call themselves, started yelling, no, you're going to sell our assets. Oh. They made so much noise, and then the elections were around 2008. And I suspect Valley must have felt that it wasn't quite a done deal that we were going to come to power. So they pulled out. Our brothers came to power. 8 long years after we stepped down, nothing came of the negotiations we've done to launch the bauxite aluminum thing. Kwame Nkrumah gave in so lightly and cheaply to Kaiser so he could use this arrangement for industrialization that he loved so much. It didn't happen till we got there, and we thought we had gotten it. We went, and our brothers came to power. They didn't follow up for 8 years. It's only now that we hear of something being done, but not quite on the same terms as. So when I take all these things in and say 4 years, and that's what I told Parliament to fight that. I regretted that on these 3 things. Suppose the term was even 5 years twice, and you work well in the first term, very likely the people would give you the second. 10 years, I believe we would have. Or it would have been very different. So 4-year term, I don't like. And it's something that we must think around. I'm not suggesting an open-ended tenure, that no matter, even if it's going to tar all the roads with gold, I won't go that way. But 4 years is too short. I think we copied the United States wrongly. So this is...
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, your contributions for the record and also other questions.
World Bank fought, IMF fought, he didn't listen. Today, if you see UBA and the big banks, Nigeria here, that's how they built their capital. There has to be a strategic framework to empower the Ghanaian entrepreneur. What you see here, and I have seen it because I've been working from the other side. A new party comes in and begins to undermine the entrepreneur that is seen to be supporting the other party. Other projects that are of national value, Mr. President, including that new airport that you try to put up on the way from Accra to Kumasi. Very laudable idea, never made it. And the same cycle is being repeated. So that's one area I want to bring out. Julius Berger, Nigeria today owns Julius Berger, Germany. How did that happen? They gave them oil concessions to build the capital of Abuja. And over time, they built more capital than the parent company, and they bought it over. The richest people now are in the Julius Berger team, but they are Nigerian entrepreneurs equipped to take over.
So thank you very much for this erudite presentation. You made this suggestion about the tenure of office of the president when you were about leaving office. I think it was last year. So people didn't take it serious, but they made fun of it. They even alluded to the fact that you wanted to change the constitutional term to suit yourself. We took this up at the Lagos Center for International Affairs and debated it very strongly. And we were of the view that it was good that the tenure of the president be extended. But one of the things that came up was whether the presidential term should be coterminous with that of the parliamentary term. And I want your opinion on that.
Well, meanwhile, I look 92. You know what caused the boycotts by us opposition to President Rawlings? Somehow, the Electoral Commission then staggered thing. They did the presidential thing first before, and then when the opposition got the feeling that they had been rigging, the opposition said, then take the whole thing. We don't want that thing in Ghana again. So I like the idea that the executive and legislature, at least at our stage of development, would happen at the same time. So suppose the Electoral Commission would come under undue influence. It wouldn't do anything that might cost the nation the way it cost Ghana. Because for a whole term, it was just one party. And then the constitution got changed. So president, parliament elections happen at the same time. I believe it's serving its purpose right now. So I would keep but as I said, the policy, the body to create that would also serve well. That would then overlap these elections, so that time a new president comes in, there will be a body with the institutional memory and all that to help guide for them to settle in, as well as parliamentary. So this is my candidate.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for this very interesting discussion we've had. Thank you for distilling the ideas for us. There was one area which I felt was left out, which I want to bring to your attention, and that is the winner takes all. 50% plus 1, 63. Are you of the view that we should change this in order to allow coalition governments so we don't have a second round, and that the compilation of the votes, presidential votes, in the first round can then be used to create a coalition so that you broaden the base for inclusion of other groups, and gradually that will grow? That is one. Thank you.
Well, you are talking of proportional representation.
Well, in whatever form you see it.
It tends to be a bit complex and might also lead to I think even in Europe, this practice doesn't tend to work too easily. So I would be careful going the proportional representation. Let's go straight. When I got the chance, you'd remember with the second round, the way the smaller parties came around, I found that I could work with some of the smaller parties. And it was as a result of that a man like Dr. Kwesindo became a member of my government, as well as even Dr. Hagen. Even P.V. Obin we retained as chair of Ghana National Investment. So we were working, the winner takes all can be very offensive. But if you have a body like the second house, like we described, you see that we're smoothing out some of the difficulties we're talking. But proportional representation might not come easy, especially when the other parties see they may hold the president to ransom. If I withdraw my support, you are down. And before you know, there will be compromises that may not be good for the system.
Mr. President, I share your idea about the second chamber. Dr. said it before. First, he calls me chief of staff.
This man is a symbol of you who lost his way in politics, and now he's also learned some law. So I think it's complete.
In the justification for the second chamber, you alluded to the fact that you want probably experienced people and probably people with wisdom that ordinarily comes with age. Don't you think that there will be a need for like an age limit to those who can serve in that chamber?
Age limit
to become a member of the second council, the second chamber. The Senate, like in the Senate.
I would be careful because I say let's use the institutions which would send them there, and I'm sure they would do the right thing. You don't go tell, I say, trade union, bring a member, but make sure he's not younger than 30 or 40 or something like that. You leave them because they would want to be seriously represented in that place, to command respect of government and legislature and the society as a whole.
Non-partisan presidential candidate. Mr. President, with your vast experience as an executive and since independence, in your view, I'm asking, what did you see that has worked as an executive? What has not worked? And what should be the way forward of at least two things that you think that might not have worked for the executive? Initially, I think in 2011, I held the same view of the second chamber. And as at that time, when I did my permutation, I had about 32, including the youth. I believe that we should have the youth representation over there so that the elderly will understand that kind of transition and how we'll be able to hand over. But at this point in time, I'm thinking of the fact that looking, and especially we've also heard, maybe we are not there yet, that sometimes you may have some of our foreign presidents giving calls with regards to certain policies that they wanted implemented in Ghana. And then we have our executives also pushing it out to Parliament. And by so doing, we tend to do the bidding of our former colonial masters or our imperialist foreigners. I don't know whether you had such an experience and what that. When we are talking about the checks and balances, I also feel that once we have Parliament as non-partisan, it can actually bring in that checks and balances, and then we have a presentation in Parliament that truly represents their constituencies, but not their parties in Parliament. After all, democracy is non-partisan. Thank you.
I don't know whether democracy essentially is non-partisan. No. There could be agreement among people which would then sort of get them to say, since we share viewpoints, let's hold together to sway the majority of our people. So I'm not sure I agree with you that democracy is non-partisan. That the youth could also be part of the second house, I wouldn't object to it. Perhaps a student leadership to sit in there with their fathers and others, so at least the elders would take account of the feelings of the youth. But as I say, it's work in progress, and we can consider all these to see how we compose that house. So that's it. And then as executive, you said as executive, what works? Now, look, perhaps you were not in the country. There were times people couldn't meet like this to talk. But now we are talking. We criticize and all that.
Mr. President, my name is Kwaku Sechiado, the first journalist to interview you after you became president. Would you have liked a freer hand to choose ministers from outside of Parliament? Were there individuals you wish you could have appointed as ministers, but which you couldn't because they were not MPs, and you were constrained by the constitutional provision to limit or to reach minimum of 50% of ministers coming from Parliament? That's one. The second One is, from your experience, I mean, you reshuffled fairly often. Which is better, for ministers to stay in position for, in other words, is longevity in a portfolio better than frequent reshuffles, considering your own sort of what you've told us in your comments, in your remarks, about the importance of longevity in office to get things done. And just by way of information, by the way, Philippines has a one-term 6-year presidency. South Korea has a one-term 5-year presidency. Just wondering whether a compromise between what we have now and the 2 5-year terms to maybe 6 or 7 single term might be a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you. You started off with what that you were talking of. Let me start with the last one about single term or 2 5-year. I would also cite the example of China, 2 5-year, till Xi Jinping, who is now wanting an open-ended. But see what China has done with the 2 5-year terms over 3 decades, just 30-year period. When Deng Xiaoping took over, it brought the market idea into economic management. See the effects. I'm rather tempted to go that way, 2 5-year. The single tenure, 6 7. Suppose the president by say 3rd, 4th is not proving that efficient or beginning to do things that people cannot live with. And you fixed your constitution, which you mustn't change. I tell you, it will be a sad situation. Philippines, I don't think the people are enjoying themselves. See the guy who just left, Duterte, killing people like flies all over the place. So I don't like that. So for 2 5-year, but if they are good, by the time they are into the 4th year, you see this man has got potential. 5 years, comes back for renewed mandate. Then we would enjoy the next 5. But single one, I do not buy that. And then as to whether freehand, the party produced me in a sense. And it so happened I grew in the party with some colleagues, some perhaps even smarter than me. And we shared some values, the tenets of party and all that. And we were all in a way working to get the party's nomination to implement these principles for the country to know that. For instance, I tend to advocate that our party should grow to become the party of the nation. It's not Kufuor, just Kufuor. So if Kufuor gets the chance and says, "Oh, now I'm here, give me free hand," so I'll bring people from outside, because all you people I've worked with down the decades, you are not good enough to help me realize. Then I would say I trick the party. So the party should be the party of principles and value systems. So you need some of them. But then, since they put me in the driver's seat, and once you are there for the entire nation, naturally I want some leeway to bring 1 or 2 people to make Ghana feel that, after all, this government is there for all of us. So this is how I used others to, but the stock really was the party's government. So the party, some people should come in there. What I didn't like though was that the constitutional provision that 50% must come from parliament. That one, I didn't like that. And I've said earlier that I would go for strict separation of powers. You are MP, be MP. If you are given chance to become minister and you accept, then you leave parliament. So this is how I will do my things. Is there another? I thought you did. Frequent reshuffle. No, I didn't reshuffle just for the frequency of it. No. Any shifts I made, like I mentioned, Mrs. Asma, I liked her so much. May she rest in peace. And she helped me so much when I was canvassing to become president. Western region, she ran a small loan scheme herself before we came to power. And in a way she contributed towards establishing Maslow. And so when we got into power, I said, women and children, and she was trying to do it. But along the way, I saw that she wasn't pulling the support I expected from the ladies, the women. When I say ladies, I mean the women generally. And especially the younger women, she was a bit aged. So I sensed, and we wanted the young people to get enthused with our efforts. So I looked, and then I will mention her name, the one who is Ghana's ambassador to America now, Halima, young, smart. I saw that she would bring on board the young people, the women generally. So I said, perhaps Mrs. Asma would be more effective going to the fisheries to open the place up for us. So that's how I did the reshuffle. And Halima came on board, and I think Halima, it seemed to be making the impact with the young people. The women generally, we were talking, fighting teenage pregnancies and all those things. So perhaps the younger people. So that's the rationale. So I didn't reshuffle just for the sake, but we were watching. The president's role is like a coach, not just a team leader, a coach. You have to know what your ministers are doing, whether they are being positive or whether you think they are just being average, when you should expect more of them. Then you should have the courage to say, please, you don't belong here, go there, or perhaps sit aside. That's how I did mine. And that thing should not be like seasonal, it should be continuous.
Okay, mine is a pretty simple one. My name is Interest. Or do we also need 216 viable? What purpose does it serve? Because it seems that they are being created because of politics. The party in power wants to gain favor with the people. They create districts for them. Is it really necessary? And should we have a cap on it at some point? Because the way we are going, we may end up with a lot more parliamentarians, a lot more districts, and they are not viable.
Sorry, but Susan asked my question on the whether to cap the number of seats in Parliament or leave it free range to grow. So it's the same. Thank you.
So that's the question you're going.
Yes.
It's necessary. But how do we ensure that there's a fair distribution among the constituencies? That's the catch. But definitely the capping, because America with the size, America is about 300 million or so people, 330 plus, and the House of Representatives, well, not about 500, even round it up about 500. So when you look at it this way, and then the principle is capping somewhere, but we 30 million and now 275. By the time we hit 60 million, we may be going 1,000. So capping is necessary. But how we work it to retain fairness, so people would feel democracy is working, is the challenge there. And then the regions, fellow politician, you are a politician, so I suspect you the regions, you say the politicians will go, as if you are not a politician, but you are such a politician. I admire her so much. Anytime I see her on television, full of ideas, bubbling, you give her the chance, I'm sure you would. So the ideas will keep flowing. What we mustn't try to do, even as we dream, is to lock out the future in dreaming. From your experience till now, you've come by some visions and ideas. Say you do, and so 40 years from now, the politicians will come and take 4 years for you. Perhaps some friend of yours, a daughter, said 5, 10 years later, will say, no, this is not how we do it. So please, don't let's look too far ahead. Especially with the new world, the technological changes. I tell you, I look at Elon Musk now. The way the man is looking and behaving is like we want to create some empire up somewhere in the sky. So you go and tell this man, let's dream. He will take you to Jupiter or something like that. So up to a point. But let the parties come with their manifestos. And the manifestos tend to reflect dreams and things like that, vision. And then allow the people to decide from time to time. So that's what I'll do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this beautiful exercise. All good things must end, by all means. And we thank you all for your cooperation. The exercise continues, and if you have any questions, please, if you have any questions or contributions, feel very, very free to let us have this at the IEA, and we'll continue to interact with you as much as possible. Nana, Dr. Jechi Yando, immediate past head for the Department of Political Science, will say the final thank you. Both of them.
Thank you very much. I am honored to give this vote of thanks. I would like to say a very, very huge thank you. We want to thank the former president, the distinguished president, John Ajekun Kufuor, profusely for welcoming us so warmly into his beautiful palace. And then, of course, and for giving us this opportunity to really come and learn at his feet, to get all that insight. In fact, you will agree with me that we've learned a lot. I have learned a lot. I've gotten an insight into his tenure, when he was in office. The ideas he's proposing are amazing. I think that separation of powers is the way to go. So those are some of the ideas I have picked up, and I'm sure we all have picked up so much. Thank you so much. We are really, really eternally grateful for this opportunity. Please join me. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And then, of course, we want to thank I don't know what to call him today, moderator and distinguished scholar at the IEA, immediate past speaker, Prof. OQUAYE, for putting this all together. And then, of course, you wonderful dignitaries for coming, taking the time out to come here. And next week, we hope you will join us at the IEA for the 5th edition. I think Justice Broby will be giving us a lecture. Before we are done, there's going to be a prayer by Reverend Professor Frimpong Mansu, and then humbly ask you to wait for a photograph, group photograph, right in here. We will be honored to have, of course, our president take a picture with us. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. A round of applause again. Thank you.